You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the podcast, a very bass-filled episode with Mr. Steve McDonald. This is going to be a really fun episode. But before we get into it, I've gotten a lot of messages and emails and whatnot in the last 48 hours asking how things were around here because the Pacific Northwest has been kind of particularly aggressively hit with the COVID-19 stuff. At least that's what I'm seeing on the news. But largely, everything is okay. It's a lot quieter around here than normal. Most people are staying home as much as possible, myself included. But I'm fine. My family's fine. Nobody is ill or anything. So that's good. But we're just trying to keep this thing from spreading as much as possible. So any activities that I have to partake in outside of the home have been very much minimized. And fortunately, I work at my house. So that was always going to be the case regardless. But we're okay. It's a freaky time for everybody. But I think if we band together and try to do what we got to do, get through this mess, we will indeed get through it. But fortunately, you have things like podcasts and YouTube and all that stuff to keep you company while you're bored out of your mind. So you should play some guitar, watch some YouTube, check out some more episodes of the podcast. If you've been meaning to and just haven't gotten around to it, now's a good time to do it. Anyhow, enough of that chatter. I'm far from an expert, so I won't be giving any opinions because I am not smart enough to have one. So, yeah. But what I am an expert in is flapping my gums, so here is some gum flapping with me and Mr. Stephen McDonald. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar tone and the people behind it. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Steve McDonald from lots of things, but notably Red Kross, Off, all kinds of different projects. So,
well, I'm in the Melvins.
Oh yeah,
too.
this little band called the Melvins. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
I just started.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a founding member, so it's worth mentioning.
It's definitely worth mentioning. I was going to get into that, but sometimes my mouth outruns my brain.
Blowing your timing. I apologize.
It's all good. I don't know if I have great timing. We're just kind of doing it.
So the podcast is mostly about guitar tone. What about bass tone?
So we actually have a lot of bass listeners who have been asking me for more bass stuff. So that's cool. I've had, as far as like strictly bassists, there's been lots of people who play different instruments. So I talk to a lot of pedal builders, and turns out some of those pedal builders don't play guitar at all. Several of them are just drummers.
I've known one or two of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
But as far as strict bass episodes, I think Matt Armstrong from Murder by Death / The Future Violence is the only straight ahead bassist I've had on. So that's gonna change though.
Matt.
We're talking to you, scheduled to talk with Ed from Thrice at some point. So we're gonna give the bassists some love. They need more love in my book.
Yeah, I think we do. At least the rock bass players, all those light jazz Stanley Jordan disciples that are like slapping away on YouTube, they get tons of love. Mm-hmm. But us rock bass players, not so much.
We've done experiments.
I think maybe I'm wrong about that. It sounds like I'm already grinding an axe.
Well, I mean,
how sad.
I mean, let's just see what happens. I think people we'll just go for it and see what happens. I don't know. We've done experiments like with doing some recording and stuff, and then just like cutting the bass out, and it's like, wow, that just sounds like dumb. It doesn't sound good at all.
That's funny. I know a singer who calls the bass guitar the useless guitar.
Who's that?
So your
Which singer
experiment.
is
Well, actually, you might know Nate Roos of the band. Well, he was in the Format.
that?
and
That
then
name sounds
Fun.
super familiar. I don't think I.
He kind of had a big pop hit a couple years ago with a song called "We Are Young."
Okay.
But at any rate, I recorded one of his because I record bands too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a producer, but anyways, I made a record by Nate years ago. But anyways, that was his nickname for the bass guitar, the useless guitar.
Yeah.
And you just disproved his nickname with your experiment.
It's pretty
taking the bass out, and it does have a purpose. It does have a use.
It's the backbone. Bass and drums. I mean, I love guitar, obviously, but bass and drums are like the backbone of rock and roll and of most forms of popular music. If you asking me, that's just my opinion.
Right. It's the foundation. It's that which everything else is built upon.
Exactly. Well, let's get into your story. I know you have a very interesting story. I know a little bit about it myself. I've read stuff about you over the years in your band, and I've obviously listened to Red Kross off and on throughout the years. And I just, everyone's going to want to know if the rumor is true about you opening for Black Flag as a very young person.
Yeah, the rumor. You mean the rumor that I scream from the mountaintops daily? No, yes, this is true. It's not just a rumor. When I was 12 years old, I played my first. Well, it wasn't my first public performance because I had played in the school orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
We did public performances as well. But my first rock public performance was at an 8th grade graduation party in my hometown of Hawthorne, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles down here. And we played this 8th grade graduation party. I was 12, so I was just graduating from 6th grade. And we asked the girl, the 8th grader who was having the party, sort of last minute, we kind of sprung it on her if our friends could come along, our new friends that we had just met prior, like a couple months earlier. They were a new band and they wanted to play also. And they were older than us. Anyway, so she said, sure, your friends in Black Flag, they can come down too.
At 12. That's crazy.
Yeah. That was our first show. Red Kross, Black Flag, Lisa Stengel's 8th grade graduation party, Hawthorne, California, June 1979.
Wow, that's incredible. How much older are they? Were they, I guess.
Black Flag? Oh, those guys are, Keith Morris is 13 years older than me.
Okay.
And he was probably somewhere in the average age of the band.
Gotcha. That's crazy. That had to have been one interesting 8th grade party.
Yeah, graduation party. Yeah, it was. And we just recently went back to the site because someone's making a movie about our story, our documentary. Yeah. And he wanted to see if we could find the girl that hosted the party, Lisa Stengel, who I just name dropped a moment ago, and see if she would be willing to, come meet us, and we could, reminisce about that evening. And it was funny because she had so she did that. It was great. She now lives, I think, in Palmdale, but she made the trek down to Hawthorne on a Friday, mind you. That was a big deal because Palmdale's like 2 hours outside of town. And but she had a very different recollection of how the evening went down.
Really?
From my memory. Yeah, remarkably different. But I was actually glad to hear her side of it because, it was 1979. This is, it's sort of a norm. She was a very mainstream, average kid having this party. So what she probably thought she was booking would have been like a Journey cover band.
Right.
Because that's what was standard in that era. You might have dipped a little further into the past and played some Zeppelin and some Sabbath or something, but for the most part, you were just going to get top 40 covers and at a local party,
Of course.
and you definitely weren't going to get this bizarre genre of originals that no one knew anything about, and frankly, kind of scared. Well, no, it didn't scare. The kids felt really emboldened when we were playing. At least my memory of it was that Red Kross were booed and heckled the entire half hour we were, I guess you'd call it on stage. But, these kids, well, most of the kids were, 2 to 10 years older than me, because there was a lot of high school kids showed up too,
Right.
or even older, young college students, like, community college students as well, coming to check out the 8th grade graduation party. But, so we got booed, and then Black Flag just kind of cleared the room. Like, the kids didn't want to mess with these older dudes playing this really loud, because they had brought in their, Sound City stacks, and, and they were a very aggressive, loud band. And, so the kids just kind of left, and we had a private concert. We got to watch Black Flag with no one else. But Lisa's memory of the event was that it was a raging success,
Okay.
and that she was really popular because of it. And I was actually really glad, because I had later thought, at the time I didn't think about it, but as an adult, I thought, oh, geez, that must have been like, social suicide for this young girl. Like, what did she know? She had no idea what she was booking. And lo and behold, it was, a very early Black Flag concert in front of a bunch of Jeff Spicoli sort of surfer stoners that had no idea what was going on. And, it could have really, it could have been something that would have been hard for her to live down the next year in high school.
Yeah.
But
who knows? She was right at that age where a lot of people, I know like that style of music was new at the time, but she was right at that age where that style of music starts speaking to a lot of people.
Sure, but she was ahead of the curve.
Yes.
Lisa was ahead of the curve, which for someone like me, that's fine. I'm still talking about it 40 years later on your groovy podcast. But for her, that could have meant that she showed up to 9th grade, but you're already kind of at a disadvantage. You're like, you have to get hazed and all that kind of typical public high school stuff.
Right.
And she could have been, sort of, excommunicated from, the Fast Times at Ridgemont scene that she was, about to immerse herself in.
Right.
At any rate, it all worked out. But because I know for me, I had a hard time at school because of the music I was into, because we were so ahead of the curve, and people didn't know. My brother is also in Red Kross. He's a couple years older. He went to that same high school, Hawthorne High School, which is, by the way, is the same high school the Beach Boys went to 20 years earlier or whatever.
Nice.
Yeah. So bizarre. But anyways, he actually stopped going to school right around that time, because the Ramones, there was this infamous concert where the Ramones were asked to open for Black Sabbath at the Long Beach Arena.
I think I've heard about this. Which sounds familiar.
Yeah, and listening and thinking about it now, that sounds awesome. Like, awesome, wow, that must have been so great, The Ramones are great, loud guitars, they rock out, and then after that, Sabbath, and you would think everyone would be happy. But that was not the case at all. The Sabbath fans were, they just booed Ramones for the entire half hour, and which makes sense to me, because I lived through that time, which, just people were confused about the genre punk rock, especially here in Southern California, because we were so far from the the origins from, whether you consider it New York or London, it's still 3,000 miles away.
Right.
And before the internet, just news traveled really slowly, that it was this cool, aggressive, fun form of rock music that, that was, available to all forms of cultures, subcultures, and whatever. And so, like the surfers and the skateboarder kids, all that, they weren't into it yet. They were still, flying high on cashmere, and and Led Zeppelin and all that, and which, I loved. Don't get me wrong, but it was like you had to make a decision back at that time. It was very defining. And there was also the disco era had come in, which was polarizing as well, and and so people were really. It was very, very important. It seemed like, maybe that's still the same thing with young people. I don't know, but to me, it seems like things are way more open-minded, and people don't really just stick with one genre so much. And they're, but back then it was, you could get your ass kicked.
Right.
Going to the beach, without a tan and, feathered hair or whatever. And so, at any rate, but after the Ramones played, after the Ramones, to bring this back around, after the Ramones basically let the cat out of the bag in the Southland about what punk rock was, then my brother could no longer go to school without getting harassed constantly.
Oh, wow.
Because before they just didn't know what to make of him. And then all of a sudden they had this genre of music and this band to attach it to. And they were just, hey, Joey Ramone, all that crap. And so, whatever. So, but luckily, Lisa Stengel escaped that, that sentence, that social death sentence.
They started coming around a little bit more by that point, I guess.
Well, no, it still took a little bit longer. It took about a year or two. Like, I remember when, like, Tony Alva turned up, like, in Skateboarder magazine with a Go-Go's pen. I remember that was monumental. And then soon after, he was wearing a Go-Go's badge, like right before they became big. And then he turned up at punk rock shows, and that was kind of mind blowing that the surfers were coming to our little world. But whatever, we were cool about it. And then soon after, I used to get called Devo all the time because people knew Devo a little bit from, I would get yelled Devo would get yelled at me, because they were on a major label, but they were still like this, from this weird world, underground world. But that's before Whip It came out. And then once Whip It came out, that was around the time when it kind of got cracked wide open and people were interested in, my peer group was interested in this weird underground world that I inhabited.
It's so interesting to hear your perspective, because I'm a bit of a whippersnapper, and so when I was growing up and starting getting into this stuff, the skateboard world and the punk rock world were so deeply intertwined at that point. It was like they were.
Yeah, I mean, with like
same.
punk music and all different kinds of. Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, there just was a time before that where you had to make a choice. Like because we used to hang out at the beach a lot, and then we stopped going to the beach because we would get picked on.
Right.
And it was not, and it was because of our musical taste. And there were just this weird little period that I inherited, that I intersected with, but soon after, I mean, like, the skateboarders are, and it makes sense, you have to have this sort of crazy, like, fearless mentality to ride skateboards and do street skating. So it would make sense that you would be into aggressive music and want to go to shows where people are thrashing around in a pit,
Of course.
And it's perfect. They make perfect sense. But just prior to that, the sort of pastime was more of like a average pastime for your skateboarder. I mean, these are ridiculous generalizations, but the average pastime was sort of like smoking a doobie and listening to Kashmir, and finding an empty swimming pool in a vacated house somewhere, and it just, I don't know, just it was still like punk sucks was like an expression, it was like disco is stupid, punk sucks, and and then people would use the whole thing like they can't even play,
Right.
because the music was more simplistic, maybe coming out of the Led Zeppelin era where these guys were like virtuosos, so but there was a different era. You said it must have been strange. It might be a little. You probably have heard these folklore before. I don't know. But
Yeah, definitely.
it was different.
Definitely, yeah.
Late 70s into the early 80s. I mean, the early 80s is when it really changed.
The divisiveness was really kind of shocking to me. I read a book years ago called Our Band Could Be Your Life, and I remember reading about Black Flag in there, and I was shocked at how aggressively divisive the music was for a scene that's supposed to be about like inclusivity and like accepting people. It was crazy to read, because I was coming up in the Warped Tour era where it was everybody was there. I was in my high school, which is not the smallest high school, but not the biggest, but it was a pretty decent sized school. Like half the school went and seen an Anti-Flag show, like cheerleaders, punk rockers, straight ahead emo kid. There was like a ton of kids going to this Anti-Flag show. And I'll never forget that. There was several hundred kids from the high school that went to that. It was really insane.
See, that's cool.
So yeah,
that's fun.
It's come full circle.
That's what we did for you, youngin.
Thank you.
We had, it's like we had our own civil rights movement. Kidding.
Of course. But let's go back a little bit, because I want to know. I already know, because I watched a little bit of the video you did with our mutual acquaintance, Mr. Nick Reinhardt, who's also been on this podcast. That about your bass that you still have.
Oh yeah, right. Oh yeah, the Fender thing I did for Fender. Yeah. I still have my first bass guitar. This is true. It's It's either a 77 or a 78. I guess I should just figure that out. It's easy enough to figure out. Fender Music Master. Mine is modified with the DiMarzio pickup. It has a DiMarzio like mudbucker, like maybe a replacement pickup for saying an EB3, like a Gibson SG bass. Those big, fat, what they call mudbuckers. And I guess that was a popular modification at the time. My parents were very, very supportive and very sweet, and they bought that bass for me for Christmas. I think maybe it was Christmas 78 or 77, one of the two. So I still have it, and it's in great shape.
It's in great shape. That's even more shocking, especially coming.
Yeah, and I don't know why.
Right
now, yeah, well, and also right now it's just like living in a bucket in my kid's bedroom. So it's like in this bucket along with like balls and, a random ukulele or whatever. But in other words, it's not in a case, but it's done well. And it sounded, to my surprise, really good on that little Fender video that we did that's on YouTube.
I thought so too. I was like, man, that's a cool. I was like, that's a cool bass. I've always wanted one of those. I don't know why exactly, but they've always appealed to me. They're
fun. They're 3/4 scale. They, it makes a lot of sense. I got that when I was 10 years old, because the Music Master is the original student model. So it's 3/4 scale, single pickup. It's basically a Mustang, but without nice hardware.
Right. That makes some sense.
Yeah.
What was the journey like from there? What did you take us through the rigs over the years?
Okay, you mean the tonal journey?
Yeah.
The tonal journey. Dude, the tone.
Tones. Toanz. Tones.
The tonal journey. Well, okay, so my first rig was actually, okay. Okay, so my first bass is the Fender Music Master. I can't believe I was so lucky to actually get a Fender bass as my first bass. My amplifier was not as fortunate, but it actually turned out to be a very cool amp. I had a piggy, one of those piggyback 212 Silvertones.
Oh yeah,
like a 60s Silvertone piggyback that I bought off a girl in school, Cindy Kelleher. She had this, it would have been like a mid 60s amplifier. They're later really popularized by, much later, by Jack White.
I know.
That's what
I know what you're talking about. The Twin 12.
Yeah, he used those in the White Stripes. I used a couple of them. And that was my amp. That was my first bass amp. Of course, I blew it up like the first day or so. I don't think it's really made for bass guitar, and I also didn't have the proper respect for it. At the time, I thought it was old and stupid. It's old, so it couldn't be any good.
Right.
But whatever. I don't remember what happened with that amp. I think my brother had it for a while, and then we might have sold it to someone. Also, I remember the cable, the power cable was rather than being like a beefy grounded power cable, it was like a funky, like a lamp,
like a thin,
plug.
Ungrounded probably.
Yeah, ungrounded, just the two prongs, and it was thin cable like a lamp, like something you would make in wood shop, electric shop, and it was really so it was kind of dangerous. But then I got my next amp was a PV TNT 100, which is a 115 combo bass amp, 50 watt. And that served me well. I loved that bass amp. It was great. Played lots of shows with it. I mean, it was probably I was underpowered compared because our guitar. It's probably underpowered. Our guitar player had a twin.
Oh wow!
Had one of those silver face twin, with the pull master volume in the 70s style, and those are loud as hell. And so I was probably a little underpowered, but those are great. I like those old PVs, the kind with the they have like sort of the steel stripes on the grill cover. Right. And mine was the kind that had the sort of aluminum knobs. They later had like a plastic knob or whatever. But these I don't know. And I also, maybe I was taking a cue from Greg Ginn. He infamously, or I don't know, I think it's noted or whatever. I don't know, infamous is the wrong term, but he played a PV PA head for his guitar head.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, they're these weird solid state. It's like, I think it's called a mixer. And at any rate, it looks like a guitar head, but it was actually like a PA head for a practice PA, practice sound system. Anyways, all those weird early PVs, late 70s, early 80s, solid state PVs are really bizarre. And yeah, I mean, I think they've had their renaissance. I think people have discovered them and maybe they've moved on. But
they've started getting popular, like those. A lot of the late 70s, early 80s, especially the big loud stuff, has gotten really popular with doom guys. So they can slam it with a bunch of fuzz genre. And it's super loud, and that's what they're going for. So that makes some sense.
There you go. That makes sense. Yeah. So that's my first rig. And then I eventually got some Ampeg stuff. Like I had a B25.
Ooh.
Yeah, like I think I had maybe 412s or something, but like a weird cabinet where it kind of looked like a baby SVT, but it was 100 watt Ampeg piggyback situation.
Yeah, those are cool.
And Yeah, it was cool. Um, but I was a kid. Nothing was loud enough. Things would blow up. I used to buy lots of SVT heads, or a couple of times at least. So like around 82, 83, in the recycler, which is like Craigslist of the time,
Mm-hmm.
like the classified ads. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, for this show in particular. Yeah, the stuff you could find in the recycler in 1983,
I'm sure.
it's
Some treasures.
And Les Paul, the average price for a Les Paul was $300, and you could buy you could probably buy 50s Les Paul Juniors for that price.
Oh,
I don't
man.
know.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's it's really crazy. But I used to buy late 60s SVT heads because, I wanted an SVT, but I knew nothing about maintenance, keeping them up. And they were, they basically, you needed to be a bit of a technician and make it your hobby. And that wasn't where I was coming from, unfortunately. So a lot of times those things would melt down on me on stage, like I still have post-traumatic stress disorder, that's my version of PTSD. Don't tell me I don't know what Vietnam was like.
I had to go through this. It's basically the same, right? Oh, maybe not.
No, not at all. No, comparing my struggle to the civil rights struggle. Oh, okay. I'm kidding, and no disrespect. So, but there would be really inopportune times because Red Cross had this history of pissing off audiences, and I don't know, around 83, 84, we were getting into like dressing up and wearing clothes, trying to be like early Alice Cooper or Kiss, at a time when that was really not. I don't know.
Not cool. Not acceptable.
not a cool thing to do. And we weren't playing with hair metal bands or anything. With maybe you would have maybe gotten away with it, except for we didn't sound like hair metal bands. But the look might have been okay. But we were playing with punk rock bands and hardcore bands,
right?
And but looking sort of like the New York Dolls, 1972, and just pissing people off again. And maybe that's because our very first performance, we had to deal with all the heckling at the 8th grade graduation party. Maybe that just kind of set the stage for what seemed normal to us.
Right.
But so you're on stage at the Olympic Auditorium in downtown LA, supporting Social Distortion, and there's 2,000 punkers, and and you are dressed, and I was wearing like Daisy Dukes and platform boots, and
it's a bit jarring. It's like, wait a minute, what am I doing here?
And
am I at the right venue?
But yeah, exactly. But the thing is, if you have the power, if you have the volume and the decibels, then you kind of have the power, and you got a guitar in your hand, and no one's going to mess with you because, or at least back then, it seemed like there was something magical about the people with the guitars. And but then the second your vintage SVT goes up in smoke, while you're in that compromised position, then you are screwed.
You lose the power, and literally,
the power just goes right away. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I am traumatized from this experience. So that's why I don't really care that much about vintage gear anymore. I mean, I like vintage gear, and I have plenty of old, especially now since I'm so old, the guitars I've had for years are now vintage guitars. But in terms of like, I think of those instruments as things to inspire, to write with, to record with maybe, but they're not where you're going to take on tour. They're not where you're going to really depend on for your, when you're singing for your supper.
Right. You need something that's going to work every time.
Yeah, you need something that's not going to let you down, and so generally that's new stuff.
Yeah, just kind of the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, but anyways, so yeah, I'm sorry, I've been digressing all over the place. But are we still on the history of my rigs?
Yeah, let's keep going on that. Why not?
Okay, the history of my rigs. Well, so where did I go from there? I had some I had the Fender, and then remember I played for a while. I played a P bass copy. I don't know where I inherited that. Um, and then eventually, so the first bass I got that I really like was obsessed with and felt deeply connected with was a back to the recycler, the early '80s recycler that's classified ads. I bought a 1976 Gibson Thunderbird.
Ooh.
So the sort of the bicentennial '76. It was like a reissue, I guess, of an early '60s T-Bird. Um, it's classic though, and I got it for I think $350, and I loved that bass. It was a much nicer instrument than I deserved. I wasn't worthy of it. I didn't have the chops yet, but I had it all the same, and I loved it. And to me, I was really inspired by the Runaways
Mm-hmm.
and Jackie Fox of the Runaways used a T-Bird. These are my references. Also, Killer Kane of the New York Dolls used a T-Bird. They, of course, were using vintage '60s ones, but I got a '76. But in '83, because I guess in '83, a '76 was a relatively new guitar. Now, of course, a '76 is it's also considered a vintage guitar right alongside the '63. But I had that bass for a couple of years. I loved it. I worshipped it. And then it has a fun story. Red Kross were doing a show in Tucson, Arizona in 1983, I think, or '84. And we were supporting our friend's band, the Bangles.
Okay.
And this is before the Bangles had Manic Monday. This is like they had just had an EP, and they were kind of like a '60s retro female Beatles band. And I loved them, absolutely loved them. And they invited us to come open up for them in Tucson, Arizona. I was 16 years old, and they were about to embark on their first U.S. tour. We weren't at that stage yet. And this is around the time of our Born Innocent album, which is a very trashy affair. And we went to this venue, and we did our sound. Well, Bengals did their sound check, and then we did our sound check. And then we had a $400 guarantee, which was a really big deal. I don't think we'd ever been guaranteed that kind of money. And this was some new venue in Tucson. And so after the sound check, the owner of the club like wanted to talk to me, and they said they had this very serious conversation that it was a brand new venue, and that they really had this goal of entertaining the people of Tucson. They were in the business of entertainment, and after seeing our sound check, they believed that we were not a good fit for their venue.
Ouch.
Yeah, which of course, because they were in the business of entertainment, and and
you were in the business of something else.
Yeah, I don't know. I was obsessed with entertainment, but I guess they just wanted a different style of entertainment, and so something a little more refined. And but they said they would pay us our $400 guarantee to not play.
Whoa.
And then I remember being like, wait, so let me get this straight. You're going to pay us $400 and to not play? And they're like, yeah. It was like, deal.
You got it. That works for me.
Yeah. But, which is, I don't know, because I love to play. But basically, so what ends up happening is that I spend the entire night drinking for the very first time in my life Long Island iced teas that the lead singer of the Bengals was buying for me all night because she must have thought it was funny to get the 16-year-old drunk. And
oh boy.
So I'm getting like bombed, really bombed, and easily. I was a total lightweight. And at the end of the in fact, I've seen pictures on Facebook of recent. By the end of the Bengals set, my brother and I were on stage go-go dancing.
Oh, no.
Playing tambourine and go-go dancing. So, yeah, I got pretty bombed. But so this comes back to my bass. So at the end of the night, I sober up, we load out, and then I realize, oh, wait, hang on, wait, where's my bass? Do you get my bass? No, wait, does so and so have your bass? So ask them. No, I don't have your bass. So it must still be in the venue. And I remember walking up to the club, and this big bouncer guy just like got in my face, and he says, "It's not here." What? I just got to get my bass. It's not here. Nothing's here. It's all gone. Really? Yeah. So that was basically, so at that point, I'm realizing, oh, right, that $400 check they just gave us to not play. Well, they just got their money. I guess they decided they needed to get their money back somehow.
Right. They're just like, here, we can get $400 out of this pretty easily.
Yeah. Give the drunk jackass. Take his.
He won't even
Which
notice.
one was his? Yeah. And
That's dirty though.
And then I remember, so they stole my bass, and then and I was like, this is uncool, but I couldn't fight them. I couldn't fight City Hall, and then I remember they tried. I remember we went to the check cashing place the next morning really quickly. As quickly as we could, one of those, express check cash places. And they had tried to put a stop on the check. Whatever. We ended up getting our money, but I didn't get the bass. And, but flash forward to like 15, 16 years later, I was, and just to add, I was devastated and paranoid and freaked out. I was 14 or 15, I was somewhere between 14 and 16. I was really young. And I remember thinking my parents were going to kill me. I didn't know how to tell them. I was so devastated. I loved the guitar, the bass. Anyways, 15, 16 years later, I'm in Hollywood looking at used guitars on Sunset Boulevard. And lo and behold, I see my exact 1976 Gibson T-Bird on the wall. And I know it's mine. It has these very distinct, very identifiable markings on it. And so anyways, it took me a while. You can actually go look at this on YouTube. There's this really obnoxious video of me confronting the guitar shop.
Oh no,
that's my bass, give it back. And Thurston Moore is with me, and someone's filming it. It was the stupidest thing. I can't watch it. I'm way too shrill. It's really embarrassing to me. But any rate, I didn't get the bass back that day. I went to court, tried to get it. Anyways, I eventually got the bass back. I bought it off the guy for what he paid for it. He was asking like $2,500 for it in 1996 or something.
Oh, wow.
And but I got it back for $600. So I still have it.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun story. 15 years. It was gone for like 15 years. It was gone from like 83. Yeah, so it'd have been like 83 to 98 or something. It was not in my possession.
This gives me a little bit of hope because I recently had Tepe Teranishi from Thrice on, and he talked about a Les Paul that got stolen from him years ago. And we put together a little mini campaign to try to get it back. We didn't recover it within the 2 weeks because I ran a little contest to try to encourage people to share about it. But hey, it's only been 10 years for him, so maybe it's still possible.
Yeah, no, it's entirely possible, especially nowadays with with social media and internet. There's so many more ways people can communicate about it. I suppose it might be harder too because there's so many more instruments now, and the pawn shop and the guitar store aren't as common for people to turn around something that's, I suppose, stolen gear probably gets sold on eBay way more and things like that.
Yeah, eBay and Reverb, whatever, things like that.
Yeah, right. Well, good. Good luck to you and the guitar owner, the gentleman from Thrice. It's a horrible feeling. It sucks to be violated like that. And when because it's it's like you have this attachment to these instruments. You give them like sort of human like qualities in your mind. So it's like a kidnapping. It's less like a theft and more like a kidnapping.
It's weird, especially the story behind that is crazy. I know a lot of my listeners have heard this already, but it was in a storage locker with just like a storage unit rather with all their gear. And he was kept keeping it there because he didn't want to tour with it anymore because he was just really attached to it. And then they went to the storage unit one day, opened it up, and it was literally like swept clean. They were like, oh, did we open the wrong unit? Like, where is everything? And what had happened was the people in the unit next to them literally cut a hole in the wall, in the drywall, and came through and got everything, and then repaired the drywall and swept everything up, and so it just looked like nothing had happened. But it was like, wow, they really went for it. It's kind of crazy.
How did they figure out that much?
I think they could kind of tell, like upon a closer inspection, that the drywall had been repaired. Right. I think was. And
then those people had like left their unit and left town, left state,
just split.
Wow.
Probably used a fake name or something to open the thing in the first place. There's any number of ways.
I mean, but what a weird scam, because it's like most people are just putting junk in their storage units. I mean, like most people are probably storing, couches and lamps that you couldn't, you know what I mean?
TVs, like things like that.
Yeah, just stuff that you couldn't even sell at a yard sale. And then, so if that's your MO, to go into these storage units and then like burrow holes in the wall, you're mostly going to land on like like a framed movie poster of Tom Cruise's Cocktail.
Sweet, I've been looking for one of these. Oh man, that's great.
Right. Yeah, something that someone just can't let go of for some stupid reason, and they decide to spend way too much money to store it.
I found an entire collection of Garbage Pail Kids. This is great.
Yeah, exactly. And so the idea of like a touring rock band's, gear just being stored away, that's what luck those thieves had.
Yeah, I guess. And at least they had to really work for it. I got to give them that much. I mean, I can't stand thieves, but they didn't just up and take it. They definitely put in some work. So whatever, I guess.
Yeah, I guess they were creative. Yeah, well, it's funny. As you were telling me that story, I was almost thinking like, it's almost like, oh, we shouldn't give anybody ideas.
Well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't. It's a little too late.
Yeah.
I like to think that anyone that's listening to this podcast would never, ever do such a thing. That's what I like to think.
Yeah. It's a much, your listenership exists on a much higher plane, higher moral plane.
I like to think so. I would like to think so.
I do too.
Well, so you got the bass back. That's super awesome. And then before we get to it, there was a couple questions I posted in my Facebook group, and there was a couple interesting questions.
Okay.
So one of them, Paul Marsh, he's a big supporter of the show. He was wanting to know like how insane was it to be playing with those early punk bands and then some of the early grunge bands that you guys opened and played with over the years? Like, are there any particular standout moments from those times on tour?
Sure. Well, I mean, I talked to, that first concert, the one opening for Black Flag, and then later that, and then soon after that Black Flag show, soon after that graduation party, we played a park, we played a concert in the park in Manhattan Beach, California with Black Flag. It was called Pollywog Park, and Black Flag had was supposed to be like a light jazz sort of series. Like families would come on Sundays, and this is amphitheater, listen to some Chuck Mangione style music, and maybe toss a frisbee around or something. And then so Black Flag gave the organizers like an obscure early Fleetwood Mac record or something. Said it was them, and totally misrepresented themselves, and then invited us to play. And anyways, that show turned into a riot, and that was sort of infamous, the infamous Pollywog Park riot. And And it wasn't a riot when we were playing, but during Black Flag, they were getting pelted with like the family's picnic baskets, like watermelons and stuff like that, were
Wow.
hitting the stage. And that got written up in the local paper, and it was pretty funny. Yeah, so there was lots of those kinds of moments early on, and then grunge era. Well, then yeah, and then I just got to see a lot of great punk bands. I mean, all the bands that I loved, the sort of generation before me, the early LA bands like the Weirdos, the Dills, the Dickies, uh, the Screamers, Bags, and San Francisco, the Avengers. Those were the bands that really got me excited about going out to clubs and seeing. I mean, of course, I was like 11 years old,
Right.
but most of those bands recorded for Danger House Records, which was like a little label in Los Angeles, and so that was a mind blowing. Anytime we got to play with one of those bands or just going to those shows, the Germs as well. We got to play with the Germs.
Oh, wow. That's
And
crazy.
the Germs, I absolutely worshipped. So yeah, that was great. And then the grunge era. So like whatever, 10 years later, I'm 22 now, and we actually weren't supporting those bands. A lot of those bands were opening for us,
Mhm.
and so we did shows up in the Pacific Northwest. We played. There's a flyer that floats around on social media of at the like it was like something called the Tacoma Ballroom or the Crescent Ballroom in Tacoma. We headlined, and then it was a Soundgarden, um, Soundgarden, Green River, and Malfunction, and then I'm sure your listeners probably know that Green River is the band that spawned both Pearl Jam and Mudhoney,
Mhm.
and then Malfunction were the first band, and Leandrew of Malfunction was the first singer of that pre-Pearl Jam band. I'm forgetting the name of the band. It's just I'm having a brain freeze.
Don't worry, I am too. I'm trying to.
Not Temple of the Dog, but the other. What were they called? Well, Temple of the Dog, I think, was the record they made for the kid who died, Leandrew, who was the lead singer of. Anyways, your listeners will write it in the comment section.
Right.
But yeah, so that, and then so I'm in the Melvins now, and those guys were at that show, and so this was like 1987 or 86, so it's sort of pre-grunge, or it's just as it's before that scene explodes into the world stage, let's say, and those guys were there, and they said that they're buddies from Aberdeen, Washington. A very embryonic version of Nirvana were there as well, and I guess the Nirvana guys after Red Cross, Melvins went in the lobby and they were talking to their friends, and the Nirvana guys thought that we were too happy.
Oh no.
Yeah, why are those guys so happy, man? That's what I was told. But Dale, I don't forget what Dale had. Dale had something funny to say about it. But at any rate, I guess yeah. So that started our relationship with that world, and then we did a bunch of shows with Screaming Trees. We did shows with Screaming Trees. We did more shows with Soundgarden, and it was fun. I mean, I remember that world seemed like it was this neat little secluded enclave. Like once again, like pre-internet, the Pacific Northwest is sort of isolated, and you've got mountains, ocean. You got surrounded by mountains on the south and the east, and then Pacific Ocean, and then that. Oh well, then there's Canada,
Right.
and then there's the great Arctic ice wall up above for all the flat earthers. Kidding. But,
That's going to go on a whole different tangent, but
but at any rate, yeah. So like essentially before, you could, when you had to just rely on, I mean, I hear these stories from Buzz Osborne all the time. Like, when you had to rely on the U.S. Postal Service to keep you connected with your obsession with underground music, via buying records through mail order, it's a really good example of how isolated people, kids were. I mean, Buzz would say it would take like 3-4 weeks to get a record or longer. And that was kind of, there weren't a lot of shops. And so, I just remember, a lot of those guys were like, wanted to know what it was like down in Los Angeles. And they had heard these stories and, what is this Jane's Addiction we've heard of?
Right.
Things like that. And, and then, but it seemed neat. It was like, oh, well, people, it kind of seemed like it was this cool community and that somehow kind of unspoiled. And, maybe it sort of reminded me of that earliest stages of the LA scene that I first got to be a part of because it was just so small and outside of the mainstream. And that's always kind of a neat time, and especially, I mean, I guess it's just so bizarre that I've intersected with several cool moments in rock and roll.
Yeah.
And that was one of them.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love hearing all this stuff because, I grew up, I know, despite what a lot of people think I'm younger sometimes than I am, but I do remember pre-internet very well. When I was growing up, there was no internet. And
Right.
So, yeah, we had it a little bit easier because there were more record stores. Well, there were CDs at the time, but there were more stores available to us that were easier
Sure.
to get to. Even our local supermarket actually had a fairly decent CD collection at the time, which was kind of surprising.
Right. Well, now you were in Portland, right? Or you are in Portland?
Yeah, technically I'm in Oregon City, which is just south of Portland, but nobody knows where that is, so I say Portland.
Oregon City.
Yes. The end of the Oregon Trail. If you played that game in school.
That's amazing. I was going to say, it sounds like a great frontier town, Oregon City.
But yeah, we had, not too far of a drive. We could go to these, mall stores, and they had a lot of this stuff. Not like the deep underground stuff, but like you could definitely pick up a Black Flag record pretty easily,
That's amazing. Well, yeah, I mean, because I'm talking to Buzz Osborne, I'm getting his stories, but he's like in Montesano, Washington, which is, I guess, an hour and a half even from Olympia. It was like Montesano is next to Aberdeen, and it's just a really it's an hour and a half from Interstate 5, mm-hmm. So it's pretty removed. And then 1983. As opposed to, I guess you're talking about like late 90s, maybe you're talking, or mid 90s?
Yeah, I'm like late 90s, early 2000s in there. So yeah, things were...
Yeah, right. So you caught the tail end of like shopping mall retail, and when there was record stores, and there might have even been some cool buyer at the mall retail store that would get all the cool Sub Pop and SST.
Exactly. We had well, it became an FYE. I can't remember what it was before that, but we would hit that up. It was not in the shopping mall per se, but right by it. And they had an incredible used selection also, like, because I remember that. Would trade stuff in. Yeah. And they were all guaranteed there, so you weren't even really worried about them not working. I never had one not work. But it was amazing.
Right.
Like, you get all these bands from all these little labels that people had traded in. I mean, we would spend hours there checking stuff out. It was great. It was a kind of a magical time because it was like a combination of what we have now, where everything's instant access, coupled with the old way of, digging through record stores and finding things that look interesting. It was like this weird medium ground between the two that was kind of magical in retrospect. It's really weird to think about.
It's transitional.
Yeah, I definitely miss it, but
so you said that they would let you try stuff out in the store?
Yeah, you could like scan the barcode, and there was headphones set up everywhere. And when you scan the barcode, it would bring up the album in their database, and you could listen to little bits of each song and decide if you wanted it or not.
Right. Got it.
Pretty cool.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so you would spend hours doing that.
Yes, it was wonderful. And again, they were relatively affordable too. So you would, because they were used, you'd walk out with like a stack of like 10 CDs for like $30.
Right.
You know, it wasn't that big of a deal.
I remember this era. I do remember this era. And I remember people people concerned about the future of retail, and that they would talk about how it's all used stuff in the store.
But that's what got me to go to a lot of concerts. You know, I would discover a band that way, and then I would be like, oh, they're coming to town soon. Sweet, let's go hit them up. It was crazy stuff.
Yep.
Well, we're getting real close to the end, and I have a few more questions. I know you got to go, so if you got to go, you just tell me to shut up, and we can be done.
Well, let's do the few more questions, and then
okay.
And I won't tell you to shut up.
Okay. All right, here we go. We got one from Corey Nigro. He has 2 questions, but let's just go with probably the more interesting one. What do you use for bass distortion, drive / fuzz? Like, where do you get your dirt from?
Oh yeah, right. Well, right now I get my first layer of dirt comes from my dark glass amplifier,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have what have I been using lately? Lately, I've been using there's Hillbish Designs does a Melvins brand distortion box called the Pessimizer.
I've heard of this before. Yeah.
Yes, the Melvins Pessimizer. That's designed by Buzz Osborne of the Melvins. So that's a great fuzz box that works good for bass or guitar. It's got it has bass, middle, and treble separate tone controls, and as well as a blend knob. So it's just a good, very utilitarian, practical, hairy box.
Sweet.
And then I also like all of the the Russian Big Muff clones out there, like the Way Huge, Russian Pickle, anything that says Russian on it, and they're usually small green boxes. I like that sound, so I'll use that too.
I do too. I've got a transitional era black. It's a black box, but it's the big box.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
It sounds so good.
Do you use it on bass?
I have used it on bass. I obviously primarily play guitar, but I love it on baritone guitars. Sounds really good on that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the thing I find with distortion, that's the difficult thing with bass guitars, is got to make sure that it doesn't chop off too much low end, because sometimes they do that.
Yes.
And I find that with the Russian era Big Muffs, where they kind of dip the mids, the Russian eras, they boost the lows. I guess they boost the lows and then the real bright highs, and it works well for bass guitar.
Definitely.
That's what I find.
All right, Gavin McNeil, he says his daughter is 14 and playing bass. You started early. What are some essential riffs that she should learn?
Oh, yeah, great question. Well, let me think. Essential riffs. Well, what I always just did was I took that first Ramones album, and I don't know if people use stereo systems anymore, but back in the day with the stereo system, you could there was the balance knob where you could turn to the right or the left and just get the left channel or the right channel. And the first Ramones album is mixed in a really interesting way where it's just it's bass, it's vocals and drums are on both speakers, but then just guitar in one speaker and just bass on the other speaker. So if you turn the tone knob, if you turn the balance knob to one side, you can just hear just Johnny, you can hear just guitar, Ramones without bass, or you can hear Ramones without guitar. And you can replace that band member. And that's what I did. So
cool.
I really playing along with the first Ramones album is a great place for a 14-year-old to be going, But then if just talking about great riffs, I don't know. I love the riffs of, I don't know. I just learned for my Fender Play thing. I just learned some McCartney, some John Paul Jones, and that's the stuff I love. The classic rock stuff. It's great bass playing. Like John Paul Jones, or maybe who else was I going to say? Anyways, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
That works. Hey, that's cool.
Okay, good.
All right. Okay, now we're getting into the classic questions. That's all from the audience for now. Not for now. That's all from the audience for today.
Okay. Thank you, Aryan.
So the classic questions to wrap this episode up. I feel like you and I could go for a very long time, and I am down for it if you ever do have the time. I could talk to you all day long. This has been a lot of fun. But all right, we'll get into the classic questions. So, what is your favorite Boss pedal?
Boss?
Yeah.
Like the brand Boss?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I like the bass distortion.
There you go.
I like the yellow one is cool. But what I'm really using right now a lot that I love that's on my pedal board is the Super Phaser.
Oh, cool. I have not played the Super Phaser.
The Super Phaser, I don't think they make it anymore, but they probably have some equivalent to it. When you turn it on 10, it just sounds like, like you're playing underwater. It's cool sounding.
Nice. Yeah. All right, and before we get into the very last question, I forgot to give you the opportunity to put up a billboard. You can say whatever you want to say. You want to point people to where they can find you, or if you just have something you've been wanting to get off your chest, this is your opportunity.
No, I have some stuff to plug really fast.
Go for it.
Okay, so Red Kross is doing our first headlining tour of Europe since 1997. So if there's any European listeners, look out for our dates in April. We're going to be in the UK, and we're going to be around Western Europe from April 1st to May 3rd. So check that out. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then we will be touring the US a little bit later in the summer. That hasn't been announced yet, but keep an eye out for dates.
All right. Perfect. We definitely have some people in Europe, so that's a good plug.
Oh, cool. Great.
All right. Last question. This is the rough one. This is the divisive one.
Oh, God.
What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Man, I thought we were just going to have like a nice time. And, do you know what kind of havoc this is going to wreak on my marriage?
Oh, boy.
I can't answer this.
Oh, boy. You haven't told your wife this yet?
Now, what's my favorite kind of pizza?
Yeah.
I like the kind that doesn't have. I like my favorite kind probably when I'm really starving and I find a pizza slice place. I'm stoked to find a piece of I think what they call white pizza, where it doesn't have tomato sauce and it has just little dollops of ricotta cheese. It has mozzarella cheese all over it, and then little dollops of ricotta cheese. I think that's really next level pizza.
That sounds pretty delicious.
Yeah, it's good.
We just had a pizza like that here recently from a place in town called Pizza Jerk. My wife ordered it, and it was like, wow, this is even better than I thought it was going to be. So
yeah, well, because it looks like it's going to be like, what did they forgot all the stuff?
Right.
Like, what's going on?
No,
this can't be any good.
It's a cheesy delight.
It's like a minimalist cheesy fantasy. Yeah, it's great.
Good stuff.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show. And I'd love to have you on again because there's a bunch of stuff that we didn't get into that I would like to pick your brain about. So.
Yeah, I'm totally down. Why don't we? Just you've got all my info. Hit me up when you feel it's time.
All right, sounds good, man.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Have a good day.
Yep. For Steve, this is Blake. As always, folks, good luck and good tones.
See you guys. This guy's stupid punk sucks.
There you go, folks. There you have it. Another episode in the can. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it as much as I did, please share with a friend. Tell somebody about it. That is the only way this thing keeps going, is by you guys sharing it with those that you care about. So if you got a bass player or a guitar player, or even somebody who just enjoys these types of conversations in your life, please share it with them in any way that you can. Maybe you have to do it multiple times before they'll finally pull the trigger on the episode. I know it's asking a lot of somebody to actually sit down and listen to a hour-plus long podcast. I know that's a big chunk of time, but you did it, so thank you. I really, really appreciate that. There's a lot of other things you could have been doing with your time, and I'm glad you lent them to this podcast because without you, this doesn't exist. So anyway, hope everybody's good, stay safe, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here, I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.